They kicked him off a city bus over 95 cents and an expired pass. No scene, no shouting, just a cane, a yellow line, and a bodycam blinking like it understood. Then the old soldier opened a soft, taped-edge photographed blackout canvas, a stenciled crest, names inked on the back end. The street seemed to hold its breath. A driver's badge met a name on paper. Doors stayed open. The diner ledger paused mid. Rules rewrote themselves in pencil. If a single picture can make a town step closer and lower its voice. What did that image show, and why did everyone leave changed, including the camera that couldn't feel it? The depot wakes before the town. Fluorescents hum over oil-stained concrete. A hiss runs the line of parked buses as air brakes test and hold. Fare boxes blink blue, chirp their test tones, then wait. In the office, a pen that prefers paper opens the dispatch log and writes the day's first line, date, hour, initials. Schedules look certain there. Outside, the sky has not decided yet. Drivers arrive in ones and twos. Lanyards tap the reader by the side door. A soft tone says the system knows their names. Hands find clipboards and route sheets stamped in black. Fingers trace the printed line: depot to main, main to river, loop, and return. A mechanic walks the row with a quiet flashlight. The beam skims tires, pauses at a valve stem, moves on. Hatches open and close. A latch clacks. A drip is checked by touch. A grease pencil leaves brief marks that stand for longer sentences. Coolant added. Hinge greased. Mirror tightened. Inside a coach, a driver settles. Seat forward to clicks. Mirrors squared to catch rear wheel and curb. Door cycle tested. The pneumatic breath answers. The lift kneels and rises once. He keys the sign. 17 River Market Depot radio check, he says into the curved mic. Dispatch returns a number from the room with the logbook. He repeats his name, hooks the mic, and glances at the tiny lens above the windshield. The interior camera blinks red faithful. It will keep whatever happens and never know why. Dispatch crosses the glassed office, stopping at cubbies where route packets wait. The rubber stamp performs its ceremony. Thump, dates and initials in corners. On the wall map, a pin has crept along river since yesterday. A neat note follows in the log. Temp detour. RIV3. RDUSEL. The first bus. Breathes deeper. Warmth finding the block. The overhead door lifts. Metal slats climbing their track with winter-stiff insistence. Cold air folds into the garage damp concrete. A metallic sting. A hint of bread. Buses nose forward, each yielding without words. The lead coach crosses the seam where indoor becomes out. Tires find gravel that will ride along all morning. Mirrors slip past the gatepost within a hand's width and do not touch. 3 bays down. Chalk kisses sidewall rubber. A quiet wager against a slow leak. The mechanic straightens, listens as a high whine settles into a hum. Alternator, fine. The wall clock agrees with the wrists. 5:30. Schedules move from promise to wordproof. The dispatcher inks 2 small words in the margin. Light fog. Later reports won't need them. Doors close with a cooperative shush. One by one the coaches commit to streets that will not yield easily today. At the back of the line, a driver taps the timetable once. He knows the corners where the morning hides delays. The stop by the brick wall, where an old man sometimes appears with exact coins and a folded transfer more ritual than need. The depot exhales and grows briefly large with space. In the office, the log rests open, ink drying on names and numbers that will become lines on a report later. For now they are only proof that the day has begun. At the gate, the same sound carries each bus out. A brief gasp of air. The low climb of engine willing itself to work. The clack and settle of doors that seal the cabin for the first blocks. Above the windshields, signs burn steady, spelling destinations like vows. Overhead, dawn opens a seam of blue, enough to show hands on the wheels and the road ahead. He wakes before the kettle, before the street remembers itself. The alarm clicks once. He turns it off. Socks, trousers with a crease. The shirt whose collar knows him. From the hook, the cap settles low. The coat buttons top to bottom. Beneath it, a dog tag finds his chest and keeps time. A saucer holds 4 coins. 2 quarters, a dime, a nickel. Exact fare has a sound. It lands like a small oath. The wallet slides inside the coat. VA card. A folded transfer habit more than need. The cane is more metronome than crutch. When the tip touches the floor, the day keeps time. The hallway smells of wax and toast. On the 3rd stair he pauses, not to rest but to let the knee decide. It agrees. Down he goes, left hand on the rail smoothed by other hands. The lobby keeps modest furniture. Bulletin board nobody reads. Thrifted table. Empty vase. a mat for shoes. He nods to the desk. Outside, the air is not chosen a temperature. The sky argues in low clouds. He breathes and calls it enough. Between door and corner lie 42 slabs, each seam a winter's signature. He has counted them before. He counts them now. At the laundromat mailbox, he shifts the cane to avoid a crack widened. Since midweek he passes the bakery, before the first tray leaves the oven. Warmth announces itself anyway. The baker's boy lifts a hand. The old soldier returns a nod. At the pawn window, a trumpet waits, mute and gold. He checks the card for a new price. It is the same. He moves on. At Elm, the crosswalk paint thins where tires lean on habit. He reads traffic not by lights, but by intentions in wheels. A bus exhales at the far curb. Not his line yet, its number joins his map. Cars idle. A horn tries and loses. He steps off when the street says go. Cane. Foot. Foot. Cane. No hurry. The tag taps once and rests. The Route 17 sign lives half a block farther. Bolted to a pole that collects notices, nobody removes. Someone scratched a heart into the schedule glass. He ignores it, the way you ignore a pebble. The bench is dry. He takes the end nearest the curb, leaving room as if making space were oath. Coins turn once, then close. Across the street, a florist lifts a bucket from a van. Water sloshes and leaves a dark crescent. A schoolboy with a trumpet case cousin. To the pond one passes and studies the cap's faded patch. He does not ask. The patch does not explain. He watches the barber's corner mirror, a borrowed view of the next block. In that rectangle he will see the bus first. A breeze troubles the taped notices. A lost cat looks briefly alive. He checks his watch out of fidelity. The bus will keep faith within a minute. Through the wallet's leather he rubs the folded transfer, testing a seam. The paper holds. Habits are scaffolds. He considers the window seat over the wheel well. People arrive in measured pieces. A nurse with a lunch pail nods from the far end. The florist's boy studies the schedule as if it might blink. The student shifts his case, listening to its weight. None asked where he is headed. He offers no address. Destinations are private until tires turn and names become motion. From the barber's mirror, a shape lengthens. Bright letters gathering into a name. He hears the hiss before he sees the bus. He tightens his hand around the coins, and the morning tightens with him, ready to measure what counts. He takes the keys from the hook by habit. Not to claim authority, but to keep the morning from slipping. The depot clock reads 5:52. His route card says 17 River Market Depot. First pull out at 55. Dwell 2 minutes at Main. He says the sequence aloud once. A low rehearsal no one hears. The seat remembers him. 2 clicks forward, and his knees find the right angle. Mirrors fold the night into rectangles he can manage. He breathes the coach awake. Battery on, ignition. The engine climbs from doubt to confidence. Around hum, steadying the wheel beneath his palms. Interior lights lift one aisle after another until the floor understands where to be. He taps the brake, feels the weight lean and settle like a large animal being persuaded. The door cycles in and out. The kneeler bows and rises without complaint. Small obediences add up to trust. 17 ready. He tells the mic. Dispatch returns a number and a simple word. Copy. Above his line of sight, the lens blinks its red. The coach's little conscience. It will store the hour completely and explain none of it. He tucks his timetable to the left of the wheel where his eye can graze without lingering. On time is not pride. It is proof he did not borrow seconds that were not his. He idles into the yard. Fog drifts at ankle height. No drama, just density. The gatepost goes by with inches to spare. He does not look proud of the clearance. The street takes the tires, and the coach becomes less echo, more road. A bakery breathes warm into the chill. He thinks briefly of toast and decides against it. The first hour forgives least. Main at 4th shows early lights deliveries. A mop bucket. A woman turning a key at the tailor. He eases to the curb, opens doors to air. No one boards here at first bell. He checks the clock. 53. He will reach the old brick wall by 58 if signals agree. He listens to the turn signal's modest metronome and lets it write the pace on his nerves. Corner after corner. Small arithmetic. Roll. Brake. Stop. Release. The coach kneels for a man with a walker. Rises when the man waves off the lift with a grin that asks for dignity rather than help. Morning, the driver says, and means it. The man taps his fare. The farebox thanks him in tones designed to be emotionless. Machines, he knows, are safest when they sound bored. He checks his right mirror for the rear door's edge and his left for the white line that wants to smudge itself across the tire. He is new enough to care and practiced enough to hide it. Dispatch murmurs about a stalled truck near the viaduct. He folds that note into his map. Elm will buy him back the seconds the viaduct would steal. At the barber's corner, the convex mirror gives him the next block early. He watches his own approach. Then the stop comes through. Bench, pole, schedule case, a curl of taped notices. A trumpet case leans against a boy's leg. Beside him, a nurse steadies a lunch pail with her forearm. On the bench sits a man in a cap, coat buttoned true, cane angled like a rule across his knee. He feels the clock tug his sleeve. Procedure is a thin wire stretched across purpose. He signals, draws in, and opens the doors to the morning he has been rehearsing for since the depot lights came on. He steadies his breath. The bus knelt with a sigh, front end lowering until the curb and floor agreed to meet. Doors parted to a practiced width. A breath of warm air slipped out, carrying the smell of vinyl, winter coats, and yesterday's rain. He rose from the bench, as he always did, cane first to find the edge, hand on the pole, one foot to test the height, then the other. The yellow line waited at his toes, bright paint worn to a soft edge by 1,000 shoes. It did not threaten, it instructed. Morning, the driver said, a word flat from use, but not unkind. His hand hovered near the Neela switch. His eyes flicked to the timetable, then higher to the lens above his head that blinked its metronome red. Behind the old soldier, passengers formed a short, patient river. A nurse with a lunch pail, a boy with a trumpet case. Two teens leaning into each other, as if their laughter required a wall. He lifted his card, the reduced fare plastic, with the city's emblem rubbed thin. The fare box woke itself from attention to response. Screen ready, tone coiled. He tapped. The sound that answered was not the small, forgiving chirp that meant go. It was a flat refusal, a bar of tone with no room to argue. On the screen, letters arranged themselves into a judgment anyone could read. Expired 3 days. He did not look up right away. He let the information settle under his ribs, where routine kept its ledger. He had not marked the calendar last week. He had counted his days by the bench and the crosswalk, not by the stamp in plastic. He tapped again, not because he believed the outcome would change, but because habit sometimes needs proof. The same tone laid itself down like a ruler on a desk. Cards out, sir, the driver said, voice keeping even. We can't. He didn't finish the sentence, because rules often end themselves. He glanced once at the lens, then toward the mirror that showed the aisle in small rectangles of faces. Time leaned against his shoulder. The old soldier tipped the card once in acknowledgement, slid it back into the wallet's front sleeve, and brought out the coins he had counted on the saucer. 2 quarters, a dime, a nickel. Exact fare used to sound like this, metal against metal, a small oath placed in a machine's throat. He fed the coins to the slot. The fare box weighed, thought, and declared again, in plain script, insufficient, senior 95 cents. Sometime in a month, he didn't care to name. The price had grown 10 cents, and told no stories about why. He checked his palm. It held only the outline of where a coin had been. He reached deeper into the pocket, where he kept a folded bill, its corner softened to cloth. But a strip of tape ran across the bill. Acceptor service orphaned the driver's hand, lifted a half-inch. A quiet warning that the slot would only embarrass them both. Sir, we need exact or a current card, the driver said. The we not royal, but procedural. He looked past the old man to the line on the sidewalk, then back to the yellow line underfoot, as if the paint could carry the burden of the words. The teens near the pole exchanged a look that practiced being older than it was. One smiled without warmth and tried not to, the way someone laughs in a hallway where silence has more authority. The sound stayed small, but it carried. The old soldier stood very still. The dog tag against his chest cooled as if weather had found it specifically. He considered the distances he had measured already, door to curb, curb to step, step to line end, what it cost to return them. Rules had shapes he respected. He had lived inside harsher ones. He closed the wallet, slid it back, and gave the driver the courtesy of eye contact, the steady kind that asked for nothing and offered the same. Can I take a seat and pay at market? When I can break, he began, voice even, but the driver's eyes touched the lens one more time and answered for him. I'm sorry, he said, and the words were not large enough to hold their job. I can't board you without fare. Policy. The driver lifted 2 fingers toward the yellow line, not to scold, but to show the boundary that made his next action inevitable. He stepped back from the paint the way a man steps back from a memory he will not argue with. The cane found the floor, turned him half a degree toward the door. He said nothing. He let the bus keep its interior, the way a church keeps its service, while someone stands in the vestibule. Behind him, the nurse pressed her lips together. The boy tightened his hand on the trumpet's handle until the case creaked, and the teens fell quiet. Their reflection in the farebox glass suddenly too sharp. The driver lowered the kneeler again as if he could ease the descent of a decision. Doors sighed. The bus lifted itself and prepared to move. The old soldier's foot found the curb, then the sidewalk. He did not watch the bus go. He found the bench again, portions of the world remeasured by 4 steps, and a painted line. The farebox returned to readiness. The camera kept its blinking, and the rule stayed where the paint said it would. Outside, the morning looked on, undecided only about weather, not about policy. The sidewalk took the weight that the bus refused. Steady concrete, absorbing the old soldiers for careful steps. The doors held half open, a compromise of hinges and hesitation, and the warm cabin air spilled out to meet the cold. Between paint and curb, the space narrowed to a thin argument. The yellow line did what paint does it, drew a boundary and stayed silent. Policy, the driver repeated. Not louder, only firmer, as if the word itself were an object he could set down between them. His fingers hovered near the kneeler switch, not to press it, but to give them both something to look at that wasn't the small refusal on the farebox screen. The nurse shifted her lunch pail to her hip. She kept her eyes on the front wheel, well, a courtesy for privacy that still saw everything. The boy with the trumpet case stood straighter, as though a better posture might balance a scene. The old soldier did not argue. His neck bent the smallest degree, the nod of a man who has listened long enough to know when words won't purchase anything. He moved one step backward, then another. Kane, describing the radius of a circle he had practiced for years, entry, reversed into exit. He left the line unbroken. Next one's in 12, the driver said. Because something had to be offered, even if time costs more when you count it by knees. He glanced at the timetable, confirmed what the paper promised, and felt the promise thin against weather and lights. He did not apologize again. He had already used the word once, and understood its limits. A breeze touched the taped notices on the pole. The lost cat looked briefly alive, then flat again. The bus knelt a hair lower, then rose, the mechanism testing itself out of habit. The soldier reached the bench. He placed the wallet on his thigh, reopened it, and moved the coins he had miscounted into a neat line that added 2.95 cents when he found, under the VA card, a dime he had not trusted the pocket to keep. He did not raise his hand. He did not lift the money like a flag. He stacked it quietly and set the wallet closed on top. A private correction made after a public one. The driver saw the movement and looked away. There is a kind of dignity that asks witnesses not to witness. The teen stared at the floor now, shoes mapped to gum and grit. One cleared his throat. The sound, small and human. The nurse's eyes softened over the wheel well and then returned to neutral. The professional's face that keeps the day from spilling. Doors, the driver said, mostly to the coach. The panels slid, rubber edges finding each other and agreeing to hold. He eased the bus off its knee, signaled, and merged. In the mirror, the bench stayed where benches stay. A man on one end, coins under a wallet. A cane leaning like a minute hand that had paused. On board the farebox, returned to its ready blue. The camera kept its rhythm. The boy with the trumpet case stood near the stanchion instead of taking the empty seat. As if standing could pay something, the coin slot could not. The nurse placed her fare and added a bill without looking at the driver. He said nothing. Some arithmetic is better left without speech. The bus cleared the block. Behind it, the damp crescent on the curb dried a shade lighter. The bench learned the shape of a new weight. Schedules kept their straight columns inside the dispatcher's book. Outside, morning accepted the correction and held its breath for the next arrival. The stop remembered more than the timetable. After the doors closed, diesel breath hung like a held note. The bench kept the old soldier, wallet on his thigh, coins corrected under the leather. The yellow line dried where his foot had been. Around him, the town collected itself into witnesses without deciding to. The nurse shifted her lunch pail and studied the space where the doors had been. She was trained to measure small changes: skin tone, breath, the tilt of a shoulder, and what she saw was not an emergency, only a misfit between rule and person. She noted the kneeler's second dip, the driver's glance toward the red lens, the hand hiding its tremor by smoothing the wallet. She drew breath to speak and let it out. Some silences hold better than words. The schoolboy lowered his trumpet case to his shoe and listened to the hinge complain, as if the instrument disliked the scene. He'd seen adults argue over less, voices bright and useless. The old man's quiet unsettled him. He watched exactness gap, pulled true, coat buttoned to the top. Kane set so it would not fall, and thought of his director. Rests are counted, sound you don't hear. He counted now without knowing why. The florist's delivery boy balanced 2 buckets and thought of water first. When the bus left, the slosh caught itself. He set the buckets and read the notice case, because reading felt like help. Times, routes, a detour, no line for what had happened. He decided the glass would fog if enough people stood there. Across the street, the barber paused with his broom at the threshold. He knew the town by reflection faces in his big mirror. The convex mirror on the corner held the bus in miniature as it turned, then only bench and pole. He swept 3 strokes and stopped. Hair collects where heads agree. So, do stories. The post office clerk rolled a canvas cart to the doorway and shaded, her eyes against the sky that meant rain or nothing. She saw coins arranged into obedience and recognized the gesture from stamps lined like soldiers. She told herself to go inside, then rested on the step, the wheel pressing her shin. Inside the diner, the owner kept his ledger open, pen across the page. The bell rang with arrival, and again when the bus left, a syncopation the book could not record. He wrote a line beneath the first entry, coffee pit forward. His waitress, tying her apron, looked through steam and watched the bench hold. She set out a paper cup. Traffic pretended indifference. A van hissed through the crosswalk. A cyclist clicked at the light. A driver glanced twice at the yellow line, as if it might repaint itself. The town's choreography resumed, but slower by a half step. The teens who had smothered a laugh let their eyes fall. One said sorry without a subject. The sound did not travel far. The nurse heard it and left it, unraved. No one told the old soldier to move along. No one asked where he was headed. People took their places as at a service leaving space, keeping speech brief, learning that attention can be shelter. The bench did not warm. It held. A minute later, the corner mirror offered the first hint of another bus. Nobody waved. The town kept watching, as if sight could make policy gentle, as if stillness could buy the old man 12 minutes for free. Some mornings are counted by witnesses, not clocks. And this one balanced quietly in place today. The radio spoke first, because radios always do. A click, a breath of static, then dispatch in the even register of people who measure days by timetables. 17. Base be advised, stalled box truck at the viaduct. Utilize elm. Maintain headway. The driver pressed the mic, thumb on the worn push-to-talk that had learned his hand. 17 copies. Elm 2 down. He meant minutes, not mood. The clock above the windshield kept its square glow. Impartial to both. He let the bus rise fully, the kneeler sealing the arithmetic of what had just happened, and pulled from the curb. The fare box returned to its blue patience. In the mirror he caught the bench shrinking, a cane leaning at an angle that looked like a hand on a sundial. He checked the run card clipped beside the wheel, the column of departure. Time stepping down the page as if gravity could keep them honest. 57 at River, 01 at Market. He traced the line with his eyes and promised the paper more than he felt certain he could deliver. Inside, the aisle held its own quiet math. The boy with the trumpet case stayed standing, fingers white at the handle. The instrument's weight rediscovering itself with each stop. The nurse took the forward seat, lunch pail on her knees, gaze set on nothing that could be mistaken for accusation. 2 teens lowered their voices to where conversation loses edges and becomes temperature. Overhead, the lens blinked its red bead to the slow heartbeat of a machine that would remember every face and never record why the air felt heavier. The driver threaded the coach down Main, signal ticking its small metronome. The light at 3rd stayed green long enough to be kind. He found elm and took it clean, wheels clearing the manhole cover that punishes inattentive springs. 17. Base copy delay at River, the radio said, not to scold so much as to mark. He answered with the clipped syllables that honor a shared language. He did not say what hovered behind his teeth, that sometimes policy costs more seconds than a detour. At the depot, another clock governed other hands. The dispatcher wrote 6:01 in the margin of the log beside a tidy note. Viaduct. Obstruct him, okay, and circled the headway numbers that spread like a small weather system across the screen. 6 coaches blinking on a map, each a dot with a time printed under it. Plus 0:30. 1:10. Plus 2:05. Headway is distance, disguised as minutes. He tapped 17 with a nail and watched the dot drift toward River. Back on Elm, the driver eased for a pedestrian who decided halfway across to reconsider. He smiled into the windshield and spared himself the horn. The clock advanced without noticing. He let the bus breathe at Lightfoot, then slid the door open for a man who jogged and made it. The farebox accepted exact coins with the satisfied chirp that passes for gratitude. Morning, the driver said. He meant it again. At the pole by the brick wall, the old soldier watched time the way some people listen to weather. The scheduled case promised 12 minutes between coaches at this hour. His watch insisted it could hold him for that long. He turned the coins once under his palm, then set the wallet over them, as if paper could teach metal to be still. The bench counted with him. Not numbers so much as breaths. Base 217 maintain, the radio reminded. A second voice layered under the first recorded guidance, masquerading as live concern. He nodded at nothing. The bus rolled past the florist. Water in a plastic bucket tipped and returned to level. The nurse pressed the stop tape with a soft click and rose, the lunch pail swinging like a pendulum that had learned restraint. She stepped down at river without looking up at the driver, then turned and, after a beat, lifted her chin the smallest fraction in a gesture. No system tracks. He returned it with his eyes. The clock above him moved to 03. He tightened the loop. No coasting, no hurry. Only the narrow lane between where schedules are kept without borrowing. 17 is back on, he told the mic, and the words were more hope than arithmetic. The radio replied with the only benediction it owns. Keep rolling. At the stop, the old soldier looked into the corner mirror, that borrowed piece of future, and saw a rectangle of light turn into a bus. He did not rise yet. He let the seconds finish their count, because clocks deserve their work. Somewhere between the radio and the glass, the town's day aligned itself by small obediences. A mic pressed, a note written, a coin found, a breath kept even. The next arrival eased into place, and the minute hand, having made its case, let the second hand speak. The bus arrived as the mirror promised, a rectangle of light turning into mass and breath. He did not rise. He kept his seat at the bench's end. Kane leaned where it would not fall. The driver another face. Another voice waited the practiced beat, and, finding no movement, closed the doors, with the courtesy of not insisting. The coach pulled off. He opened the wallet slowly, not to stall the morning, but to set it in order. The leather had learned his hands. The hinge creaked like a whispered reminder. Coins came first. He lifted them from the pocket, and placed them on his palm. 2 quarters, a dime, a nickel. He added the lost dime he'd found under the VA card, and listened to the sum become a sound in his head. The old arithmetic that never argued. He balanced the stack, let the metal cool his skin, and tipped them into the wallet's coin pocket. He checked the card that had failed him. The city's emblem was rubbed to a ghost. The date had moved past him 3 days ago, without raising its voice. He did not scold himself. In other years, other places, a missed mark had cost more than a seat. He slid the card behind the photograph sleeve, and allowed the plastic to be quiet. Inventory continued. The VA card clouded at the edges, but loyal went back in its slot. A folded transfer, habit more than function, lay flat as a pressed leaf. Beneath them sat the small envelope softened by years, edges rounded by pockets and winters. He touched it with the back of his finger, as one checks a door that should be locked. It was not a plan. It was a possession. Across the street, the barber made a show of sweeping nothing. Inside the diner, the owner poured coffee into a paper cup, steam rising like a flag that needed no pole. The post office clerk adjusted the strap of her canvas cot and pretended to watch the clouds. The boy with the trumpet case tapped 3 quiet notes on his suit. Soft, softer. Silence then stopped, as if silence were the measure the piece required. Another bus grumbled in the corner mirror's oval. Not his line. He let it pass without asking it to be something it wasn't. He moved the cane with his foot, aligning it with the bench's slat, an old field habit that preferred tools ready for the next command. He folded the wallet, squared its corners against his thigh, and rested both hands over it. The way you settle a book after you've finished the chapter that mattered. He could have risen, could have flagged the last coach, and paid the fare that now sat obedient inside the leather. He chose not to. It was not pride. It was procedure, the kind that saves breath and keeps the morning from mistaking urgency for need. Training, long dissolved into reflex, said the first step after correction is to hold fast, check your kit, and read the ground again. Wind troubled the notices on the pole. The lost cat stared through raindrops no longer there. He watched the barber's mirror, his borrowed future, and let whatever rectangle the glass offered arrive at its own speed. His palm kept the memory of coins a moment longer, a cold circle that would warm by the time the day asked for it. He closed his hand, opened it again, and felt the arithmetic resolve into readiness. He would stand when the ground and the hour agreed, not before, not late. He opened the envelope as if opening weather slow, with the respect you give to something that can change the air. The paper had learned his pocket, its corners rounded to softness, its flat polished by thumb. He slid a single photograph into daylight and let it rest across his palm. the cane balanced against his knee to keep the moment steady. The picture was not large, not glossy. Its surface wore a faint satin from years of being looked at more than it was shown. The edge told the first story. One corner was mended with a strip of aging tape gone the color of tea. A crease running from the margin to the center, where it had once threatened to split a face. The soldier's finger settled there, not to hide the repair, but to acknowledge it, like a veteran nodding to a scar that belongs but does not lead. The border had been thumbed to a thinness that made it more cloth than card. He smoothed it once against his trouser leg, teaching the paper to lie flat in the small wind dot in the image. A line of buses crouched under blackout canvas, their numbers chalked on windscreens that knew salt and dust. Headlights were hooded to slits. On one front panel, almost lost to shadow, a transit emblem sat stenciled at an angle, same crest as the one now over the driver's head. Younger by decades, simpler by need, the men in the picture were not posing. They were being counted, helmets tilted, collars up. None looked at the camera long enough to be caught showing anything like story. The picture did not ask for that. It asked to remember. He lifted the photograph an inch to let the light find it. Across the street, the barber lowered his broom and leaned a shoulder to his doorframe. He could not see the details, but he saw the shape of the old paper and understood it the way a barber understands a widow's half-inch. Trim what it costs to ask. In the diner, the owner set the paper cup on the counter, left the lid off so steam could speak, and did not call for anyone to carry it out. The post office clerk paused her cart on the top step and turned her head to listen to nothing, which is often how you hear. On the back of the photograph, a hand had written 3 last names and a date, month, year, not the day. The old soldier did not flip it now. He remembered the ink without needing to see it. The names had been practiced enough that his mouth could form them silently. The way prayer lives in a man, even after speech becomes work. He did not say them where traffic could take them. He kept them under his breath and let the names belong to the street without needing to be audible. A boy with a trumpet case watched from the pole, eyes on the picture as if it were a score he could not yet read. He moved his fingers against the handle, finding valves that were not there, counting rests that were. The nurse saw only the posture, the way the old man's left hand cupped the bottom edge and the right steadied the corner, as if preventing loss were a practice task. The florist's delivery boy looked from the buckets to the bench, decided not to set the cup down on the curb where it might leave a ring, and held it a little longer. Another bus slid through the convex mirror's oval, too bright to be the right number. He did not rise. The photograph remained on his palm, an object and an instruction. He traced the emblem lightly with a fingernail, the stencil that matched the crest, that now blinked in lead above windshields around the city. He had once ridden under that mark when its paint was fresh and its meaning heavier than fair. He let the picture tilt, then returned it to level, keeping the seam of tape from stress. The wind lifted, failed to take it, and moved on. Coins in his wallet remembered their job. The envelope waited, but he did not put the photograph away yet. Paper, like memory, can take a minute to finish its breath. Across the street, the ledger in the diner lay open to a clean line. The barber's broom stayed quiet. The bench, built to hold weights without stories, carried one anyway, and the edge of the photograph, smoothed by insistence, caught the morning and refused to slip. He looked into the mirror at the corner of the borrowed future and waited for a rectangle of light to turn into a decision. The driver carried the next block, with the discipline of someone who has learned to keep both hands on a problem until it lets go. Elm gave him green when he asked politely. Headway, the distance measured in minutes. The map's silent sermon pressed its thumb on the back of his neck. 17. Maintain. The radio breathed, a voice that could have been live or recorded. He answered by not wasting the yellow dot in the mirror. The nurse's face had settled into the even look of someone who can watch pain without giving it a mirror. The boy with the trumpet case stood as if the pole were a music stand he did not need. The teens had discovered a fascination with their own shoes. None of that would move the clock. He felt it anyway. He tied the coach into river with a gentleness that saved the front tire, eased past a delivery truck that preferred the bus lane, and let the next stop take its due. Coins chirped. A transfer whispered into a pocket. A woman asked how many minutes to market without teaching her voice to hope. He answered in numbers, not promises. The camera above the aisle blinked its ledger into permanence and refused to take notes on tone dot at the edge of the block. A quiet from the back reached the front, the kind of silence you only get when a bus full of strangers has just agreed, without looking at each other, to think the same thought. He checked the right mirror. In the lower corner, his own shoulder offered him no advice. In the upper corner, the street he had just left held a bench with an empty space, still shaped like a decision. He signaled right. then left, then right again. A private code that meant nothing to anyone but his nerves. He heard himself speak into the mic, without hearing his own plan. Base, 17 looping block at Elm. Brick, for a courtesy return. Will recover at market. The radio answered in even syllables. 17. Maintain headway. The word maintain stood there. More instruction than conversation. He gave the wheel a degree of turn that was not disobedience. Only geometry. A delivery alley opened like a parenthesis between two brick backs. He took it slow, mirrors folding the world into caution. The coach breathed narrow. The tires negotiated gravel that kept small secrets. And a pigeon's congress lifted without outrage. He came out on the parallel street, 1 block over, the route's shadow. In the mirror, the nurse did not smile. She did not frown either. She shifted her pail to her other knee, and kept balance for them both. At the corner, a light considered its duty, and turned. He took the right. Then another, the city granting him a small mercy in the geometry of its grid. He was not yet back where he had started. He was nearer than policy preferred. The clock ticked forward like a man folding then unfolding a letter he does not want to send. He glanced at the run card. The printed line pretended ignorance. Schedules cannot write an addendum for conscience. He made the last turn, and saw the stop again. First in the convex mirror, then true. The bench held the old soldier in the same square of wood. The cane in the same angle. But now, a small rectangle caught the day across his hands. It was a photograph. Edges softened. Tape catching a line of light. The driver eased the coach in, and let the doors open before they were asked. Air traded places with itself. The cabin exhaled what it had held since the yellow line. He did not make a speech. He did not reach for the farebox. He kept one hand on the wheel, the other near the Neela switch, and waited for the old man to decide whether the distance between bench and door was worth crossing a second time. Behind him, the bus remembered how to be quiet. The radio sat in its cradle like a rule that might forgive a single sentence. The sign above his head burned its destination without irony. Outside, the morning watched the turn complete itself and offered nothing more than room. The bus idled at the curb. Doors opened to the morning. The kneeler bowed a fraction. An invitation practiced into muscle. He did not wave. He did not rise yet. The photograph lay steady across his hands, tape catching a seam of light. The driver kept one palm near the switch and waited for breath to even. Street sounds stepped back. Diesel softened. A pigeon's feet numbered the curb. The diner's bell held its tongue. The boy with the trumpet shifted once, as though an unseen conductor had lifted a hand. The nurse rested her pail on her knees and gave the scene her stillness. The old soldier lifted the photograph just enough to meet the driver's line of sight. Not a Plean offering. The image wore its years without apology. Blackout canvas over bus roofs. Chalked numerals. A transit crest stenciled quick and sure on a nose panel. Faces turned half away, as people do when cameras arrive to count, not to console. The driver leaned across the barrier the way water leans inside a level. No suddenness, only correction. He did not touch the picture. His eyes found the crest first, surprised by how unchanged symbols can stay while everything around them needs replacing. His gaze moved to a shoulder patch on a younger man, then to the black slash of ink on the back where names live when metal will not hold them. "May I see the reverse?" he asked, not so much a question as a care. The old man turned the card with precise fingers. Tape protected by habit. 3 surnames, a month and a year. A unit notation learned by heart long ago. Beneath them, in smaller script, a first name he had once used at Formation Carterand, a last name matching the badge above the driver's pocket. The recognition did not flare. It settled. The driver's shoulders let go of attention the timetable had been holding for him. He said the name on the card the way you test a radio after Reapersoft, expecting an answer from the air. The old soldier's mouth tilted a degree toward acknowledgement. Nothing dramatic. 2 men meeting inside a line of ink, dot on the sidewalk. The barber lowered his broom and balanced it upright, like a flag that does not need wind. The post office clerk said her cart's brake with a toe. Inside the diner, the owner placed a lid on the waiting cup and did not send it yet. The town chose to hold the way hands do when a fragile hinge moves. The interior camera blinked its patient red, capturing posture, angles, the tilt of paper. It would store the crest, the tape, the turning. It would not keep what pressed under those details. A system finding itself in an older uniform. A route intersecting with a convoy drawn from memory. The driver did not reach for the farebox. Procedure loosened a notch without announcing it. He met the old soldier's eyes and let his own name ride the few inches between them. Borrowed from the badge, verified by the reverse of a photograph older than his bus. In that short passage, Policy made room for address. A gull flicked past the windshield and was gone. The driver steadied the wheel without moving. He did not order cokes or apologize. He kept the door open and the bus breathing. Recognition given the space clocks, never grant for free. On the bench, the old man lowered the picture, not away, only closer to his chest, and held it there as if heat could pass both ways. The bus breathed with its doors open, idling like a patient animal that knew not to move. The old soldier lowered the photograph to his chest and kept his hand over it, as if the paper were a small flame. The driver's palm hovered near the kneeler switch, ready to bow or rise. But he did neither. People gathered without advancing. The barber leaned on his broom at the threshold, as though the doorway were a pew. The post office clerk paused on the top stair, fingers on the cart's handle. Not for balance, but for witness. In the diner window, the owner and his waitress stood, steam clouding the glass. Inside the coach, the aisle softened. The boy with the trumpet case quieted the hinge with one hand and let his other hand float over air where valves would be. The nurse rested her lunch pail and placed both feet flat, the way you root a patient to keep the room from tilting. Two teens, emptied of their earlier laughter, watched a door with the cautious respect of students who have just learned the chapter they skipped will be on the test. No one spoke. To the old man, because the town felt the terms he had set, this was a showing, not a story. The photograph had just taped emblem familiar across decades was more document than explanation. Even those who could not read its details read its posture. A bus crest from a time when transport war khaki had met the modern crest in lead. The overlap did not make noise. The camera's red light kept time, impartial and loyal. It would archive angles, distances, the faint tremor in the driver's sleeve as a muscle relaxed. It would miss the lesson the aisle learned. How silence can spread like shade and make a place inhabitable for truth. A breeze troubled the taped notices on the pole. The town let all of it pass without folding the moment into those minor movements. The driver finally spoke the old man's surname only. That, gently, in the tone dispatches keep spare for weather. The name steadied the space, like chalk on a board. Heads dipped by increments. The old soldier lifted the picture a fraction, so the driver could confirm what he already knew. No one stepped closer. The kneeler did not move. The bus respected the distance as if it were rope. In the diner, the owner wrote a line in the ledger and closed the book with care. Bench-photo-witnessed. He did not announce it. Ledgers have learned that spoken totals leak. Time resumed thinly at first. A pedestrian hesitated, chose the far side of the street, and continued. The nurse glanced at the clock above the windshield and decided one appointment could absorb a late arrival. The boy with the trumpet case thought of rest again, and of the conductor who says, "Measure your silence with the same precision as your sound." The driver extended his hand, not for the photograph, not for pity, but for boarding. The gesture said, "This door knows another way to open." The old soldier nodded once, slid the picture back into its envelope, and tucked the envelope into the wallet's quiet. Then he arose with the cane's practiced measure. Still the crowd did not close. Respect, having found the correct distance, kept it. The bus bowed a notch. A step became a threshold, and then a floor. When his second foot cleared the yellow line, the coach did not cheer. It breathed out once, like gratitude that refuses applause. The service truck arrived the way help ought to, without horn, without hurry. White hood nosed to the curb behind the bus, hazard lights ticking a calm heartbeat. A mechanic stepped down with oil on his sleeves and a clipboard tucked under one arm. The paper spotted like a map of older work. He glanced first at the kneeler, as a man scans a wristwatch habit before inquiry. The door breathed in and out once on his command, and pronounced itself sound. 17. Maintenance on scene. The driver told the mic, voice kept small. The radio replied with a notation tone, a beat of sound that meant the moment now had a line in a database. The lens above the aisle blinked. Loyal witness to bolts and breath. The mechanic walked to the front and saw the photograph in the old soldier's hand, as one recognizes kint the way posture reveals relation faster than features. He did not ask for it. He let his eyes find the transit crest first, the stencil from another decade, then the blackout canvas, then the angles of men who had learned to be counted without complaint. A softness not at odds with oil touched his mouth. "Break room," he said, mostly to himself, and the driver heard the word like a door opening in a building he knew but had never entered fully. "We've got the same crest framed by the time clock. Convoy, on the old relief line. My grandfather pointed to it when I hired on, told me buses moved more than commuters once." He set the clipboard's metal edge against the bumper and wrote nothing. Pencil hovering. The page already carried a neat column of boxes waiting for ticks. Door, kneeler, farebox, lift, space at the bottom for remarks, space at the very bottom for what never fits. The diner owner set the lidded cup on the counter and finally nodded to the waitress. She carried it to the curb like a small ceremony and placed it on the bench's empty slat, a delivery without receipt. The barber gave half a salute with the broom handle and pretended he had meant to shift his grip. The old soldier eased the photograph back into its envelope, not closing it fully, as if wanting the paper to breathe. He did not speak rank or unit. He let the clerk at the post office murmur a date to herself, and let the boy with the trumpet hold the silence like a tied note. Doors. Fine, the mechanic said at last, checking a hinge with 2 fingers. The listening kind. What's not fine is smaller. He didn't point. He didn't have to. The yellow line had learned a lesson already. The driver looked at his own hand and let it rest near the switch again, not as shield, more as promise. By the radio. The dispatcher flipped a page in the log and drew a short bracket across 4 routes that would tangle with a detour later. His pen paused above the margin, then wrote 3 words he had no column for. Honor photos. TEMP. He underlined temp once. Light. New rules begin as pencil base, the mechanic said into his phone. Not the bus radio. Maintenance, clear 17. Also, heads up veteran on board. Emblem matches the archive frame. He listened, nodded, and added. Softer. Yeah, that one. Paper doesn't blush. His ears did dot inside the bus. The teens found the window useful again. The nurse shifted her pail and offered the old soldier the forward seat, with a tilt of chin that made the invitation formal. He accepted by not refusing. The driver pressed the kneeler, a bow performed correctly, and the cabin received him. The clipboard finally acquired its mark. The mechanic wrote in the remarks field in block letters that would outlive the coffee on his cuff. Door op observed courtesy return. Under it, in smaller script meant for whoever reads between lines. Crest match archive photo. He tore the yellow copy for the file and kept the white under the clip. Sheet on top of a thicket of other days. The camera blinked. The ledger across the street waited for ink. The dispatcher's margin note dried. New rules do not arrive with trumpets. They appear as handwriting that knows it may be erased and writes anyway. The mechanic shut the service truck's door with a gentle hand and gave the bus a small tap on the fender. Superstition he would not name. The driver closed his palm over the wheel, felt the coach answer through rubber and steel, and understood that a route can widen without changing streets. The door closed. The bus breathed, and the morning, having been amended in pencil, agreed to carry the correction forward. The little red bead above the windshield kept its pulse, calm as a lighthouse. It was faithful to light and indifferent to weight. Inside its rounded glass, a sensor passed the aisle into squares and sound into decimals. Door open, door closed, steps counted. Coin chime, recorded in dB. In its mind, which was not a mind everything, was a coordinate. It saw the old soldier in a cap, cane at his knee, photograph on his palm. It saw the driver's hand hover near the kneeler switch, then lower. It saw the nurse's pail settle. It saw the boy with the trumpet shoe standing. The lens collected those choices as if they were dust motes, passing a shaft of light, visible, measurable, without story. On a pole near the barber's corner mirror, another camera regarded the curb, writing the morning to a server in the municipal building. On its monitor wall, timecode scrolled. 6 hours 7 minutes 14 seconds, and 3 milliseconds 6 hours 7 minutes 14 seconds, and 4 milliseconds 6 hours 7 minutes 14 seconds, and 5 milliseconds as clerk would later tag the clip with a location, and an event-type boarding difficulty, and the file would take its place, under an index that did not believe in grief. The microphone, above the farebox, heard what it could. It caught the declined tone when the card refused. It caught the 2 syllables of policy, rounded slightly by the driver's breath. It caught the smallest laugh from a mouth that wished it back. It caught coins counted wrong once, then right. It did not catch names spoken without sound, or the prayer that lives between an inhale and an answer. Compression did its work, turning motion into math. The color of the photograph dulled a shade, then dulled again, until the tape at its corner read as a narrow bruise on the pixels. The transit crest from the convoy years blurred to a geometry of gray. The algorithm preserved edges and let texture go, faithful to what it had been told to value. At the depot, a different camera watched a breakroom clock over a framed print. The same convoy, untouched by codex, hung near the timecards like a witness who never forgets a shadow. The mechanic, washing his hands under a stubborn faucet, looked from the print to a thumbnail on his phone sent by a supervisor. Review event route 17. The thumbnail showed the door, the bench beyond, the old soldier, a smudge of posture. He tapped. The clip opened. The red beads record began. He watched. Chain of custody is a kind of liturgy. Timestamps, hashes, signatures, logs. Someone at the municipal building wrote the checksum and verified it against an expected value that always arrived like a promise kept. The clip was whole. The clip was admissible. The clip, complete. Could not remember the diner ledger, where a line now read. Bench-photo-witness. On the bus. The lens blinked again. The kneeler bowed. The old soldier crossed the yellow line on film, exactly once in 20 frames. If you paused it there, you could measure his gait within a decimal place, and never learn why the aisle lifted its attention like a congregation. The red bead would continue all day. Its eye never fatigued. Its heart never faster. At night, it would hand its memory to the room that smelled like paper, where a rack of fans kept cool 1,000 such mornings. There the day would live as rectangles, inside folders, inside dates. Later, if anyone asked, a supervisor could click and play the moment back. The door, the hand, the step, the quiet. The film would not lie. It would also not feel. Still, the coach waited with its patience visible. The doors parted. The floor bowed. The red bead above the windshield keeping time no clock admits. The photograph had gone back to its envelope. The envelope to the wallet beneath his palm. The coins were settled. The cane leaned, ready. He did not rise yet. The morning, like a careful clerk, checked each item twice. The driver unlatched his belt and stood. A hand brushed the kneeler switch, then left it alone. The bus was already at its lowest courtesy. He stepped down from the seat and came to the threshold. Not beyond it, not into the street. Only to the place where aluminum meets rubber, and decisions change their names. The aisle behind him held steady. Passengers arranged by attention rather than assignment. He said the old man's surname softly, testing it the way one tests a bridge plank before crossing. The sound fit the air. The barber, across the way, tipped his chin. The clerk on the post office steps paused her cart, one wheel against the riser. In the diner, steam beaded the window in a round scar where a palm had rested moments before. The owner and waitress stood just behind the glass, not meaning to be seen. The driver did not explain policy or his turnback. He offered his hand. Palm open, fingers quiet, a hinge without force. Not to pull, not to hurry, only to make a place for balance to pass through. The gesture lived between them like a rung lowered on a ladder already leaned. The old soldier looked at the hand, then passed it at the step, then back to the hand. He set the wallet inside his coat, where leather had learned to lie against him. The dog tag moved once under the collar and stilled. He took the cane in his left hand and tapped the curb once to let it record the ground. The bench, relieved of his weight, remembered him. He did not take the driver's hand on the first step. He made that one himself. Boot to rubber, cane to threshold, his knee arguing and then agreeing. On the second, the driver's hand hovered nearer, close enough to be borrowed. The old man borrowed it, not as rescue, as partnership. Weight transferred like a story told softly. Confidence passed and returned. The third step was his again. At the landing, he released what he had borrowed, and made it clear by the angle of his wrist that he was grateful. The aisle, which had learned stillness, learned motion. The nurse turned her knees to make space before being asked. The boy with the trumpet, still standing by choice, shifted a half-pace back and lowered his case to offer another square foot of floor. One of the teens, whose laughter had failed earlier, stood fully now and marked the seat behind the front wheel with an open palm, as if labeling a place in a ledger. Reserved, not by rule, by regard. The driver raised the kneeler a fraction, meeting the old man at the right height, the way you meet a note at pitch. The fare box kept its quiet. No one spoke to it. The red bead blinked, gathering rectangle's hand at threshold. Cane said true, shoulder brushing the stanchion, but missing the reason the aisle lifted. As wheat lifts when wind promises rain. Here, the driver said, and the word performed to Job's. Direction for the body, and a modest promise that no one would ask for more than sitting. He reached to steady the stanchion, not the man. The old soldier turned and lowered himself into the seat over the wheel well, the one that faces forward and tells the road by sound, the slap of seam, the hymn of tread more clearly than the others. He rested the cane against the rib of the seat, aligned it with a habit's precision, and folded his hands on his coat where the wallet lay. The nurse, having given the space, settled back with her pail in her lap and eyes on nothing in particular. The teen who had ceded the seat kept his balance by the pole, and found that standing could be a kind of apology without speech. The boy with the trumpet case uncased nothing. He listened to the engine and decided it was in beef, as most buses are, and that this, too, was a key. Outside, The mechanic in the service truck closed his clipboard and nodded toward the windshield. A salute passed through glass. The barber lifted his broom once like a staff and let it down. The post office clerk, satisfied the hinge of the door would not interrupt the moment, stepped inside to sort letters with new care. In the diner ledger, the owner drew a small underline beneath the line he'd already written, and did not show it to anyone. The driver returned to his seat and let his palms find the wheel in that exact way hands meet old work. He looked in the mirror not to survey compliance, to check the simple fact of a figure seated where a chair had been waiting. The old soldier's gaze was forward, as if the windshield were a map he had already folded and unfolded on other mornings. The driver breathed, pressed the door switch, felt the panels meet, and eased the coach's weight into motion. 17 rolling, he told the mic, voice even. Dispatch answered with the word, "The radio keeps for days, that must go on." Copy. The bead above the windshield blinked. The sign declared the destination without irony, and the bus, having learned a new procedure without adding a line to any manual, took the lane. At the front, behind the wheel well, a man sat with his cane aligned and his hands quiet, and the coach seemed, by degrees, too small for film, to ride smoother for having him aboard. The coach gathered itself from the curb and stepped into traffic with the discretion of a large thing practiced at seeming small. Inside, the old soldier sat above the wheel well, hands folded on his coat, cane aligned to the seat rib, as if it were a rule laid along a margin. He faced the windshield, the way a reader faces a page head, tipped slightly. Silence particular. The driver felt the weight settle in a way that wasn't pounds but purpose. He let the throttle rise only until the hum held its B-flat. The note buses choose when they mean to carry, not hurry. The street did what streets do, offered small tests. A delivery van half in the lane pretended it would move, then didn't. A cyclist negotiated the gutter with a faith that made brakes prudent. The driver answered each in the modest grammar of his craft. Signal early, leave room, keep the ride even. He watched the right mirror for the rear door's edge, and the left for the white line that wants to smear itself under the tire. In the upper mirror he checked the aisle, and found, as he hoped, the old man steady, the nurse settled, the boy with the trumpet still standing by choice, the teens newly attentive to the world. Past the barber's corner, the storefront glass offered a brief reflection of the cabin faces arranged by witness rather than habit. The barber himself raised his broom, an inch in the frame, and then lowered it. A benediction that didn't slow the schedule, but made it feel less sharp. The driver returned his eyes to the road and eased the coach through the green at Elm, as if the light were a favor to keep. The old soldier did not narrate. He tapped the cane lightly once when they passed the brick wall that used to hold wheat paste posters about bond drives. The boy with the trumpet heard the tap and let it mark a bar line in the engine's hum. At the bridge that had been rebuilt after a spring flood some years back, the old man's fingers tightened on the coat, only long enough to note the seam that hadn't been there before. When the coach slid by a fenced lot, now stacked with pallets, he inclined his head, as if counting something that no longer stood. The bus yard, that had been a bus yard, even in the years when roofs wore canvas and numbers were chalk. 17. Base, how's your headway? The radio asked, a voice that belonged to no one on board. The driver glanced at the run card, the time above the windshield, the cadence of lights. Recovering, he said, and made recovery not a claim but a practice. No lurches, no brakes that apologize. The red bead blinked above him, storing rectangles that could be replayed in a window later. It would not store the way the aisle had stopped, insisting on its own story. At River, to boarded one with a bag of print shop scraps that smelled faintly of ink, one with a face the driver thought he knew from the market. Coins chimed true. The fare box delivered its neutral confirmation and stood down. The old soldier kept his hands folded. He had the 95 in his pocket now, exact as a solved problem. But he did not move toward the slot. The bus knew the difference between owing and owed without being told. The nurse pressed the stop tape for a woman near the door who missed it. The gesture asked for no praise. The teens, newly fluent in stillness, watched the street like students who had found the point of a class after believing there wasn't one. The boy with the trumpet counted light poles in fours and, without daring to move the latches, let his fingertips practice a fingering that would have fit the engine's note. They passed under the viaduct's shadow where the box truck had snarled the other route hours earlier. Elm had bought time and kept it. The driver felt the coach's body lengthen and shorten with the road, a breathing thing. He trimmed speed for a crosswalk where a child tugged a parent backward and returned the pedal to its place only when both feet were well on the curb. He did not look back to see if anyone noticed. He had learned to be content with the ride itself, knowing. The old soldier tapped the cane once more at the corner where the street narrows. by 2 bricks and a memory. The sound was light, not a command, more like a penciled checkmark in a ledger that lives under the skin. He did not smile. He did not sigh. His mouth found the line between the two and held it to the expression of someone who recognizes a city that has changed correctly in a few places and wrongly in others, and chooses, for the span of a bus ride, to call the balance workable. Market rose ahead in its usual grit and angle. Butcher, a stack of crates, like a diorama of symmetry. The driver felt the schedule lean toward him, testing his arithmetic. He eased to the curb. The doors opened as if the morning had been written for this hinge. In the mirror, he saw, not for the first time today, the difference between a bus that merely travels and a bus that carries. The ride had been remeasured by a man seated quietly over the wheel well, and the city, without fanfare, permitted the new units. The clock advanced. The aisle breathed. The coach waited for the next instruction, and found it in the way the old soldier kept his hands folded, as if to say, "Proceed." Market took them in with its usual grammar. Awnings. A chalkboard that misspelled peaches and sold anyway. The bus kissed the curb and opened itself. Air traded places. The city rearranged. The old soldier kept his seat over the wheel well, hands folded where the wallet lay, cane aligned with its rib. He did not rise. The nurse stood first. She pressed the stop tape with the back of her fingers, a gesture like writing without ink, and stepped to the fare box. Coins chimed. She added $1 with no ceremony. The bill smoothed once and fed to the slot that refused yesterday, but took now. "For him," she said without turning, a pronoun set carefully on the counter of the air. The driver did not answer with policy. He nodded at the meter's vacant gratitude and let silence keep the receipt. The fare box produced its small acceptance. Numbers climbed a hair and then forgot to matter. The nurse moved to the door, pail swinging at her knee like a metronome. She stepped down into the market's clutter and joined the hour. Behind her, the boy with the trumpet waited. The forward seat behind the soldier had emptied, but he stayed standing, hands on the case, as if weight belonged in his arms, until the ride had learned its lesson. He tipped his head toward the old man in a shy half-salute only musicians know respect paid in beat counts. When the doors sighed again, he followed the nurse out and vanished into produce and sound. One of the teens came forward, cheeks pinked by something more useful than embarrassment. He touched the stanchion with 2 fingers, a pledge, and spoke just above the engine's beef. "He shouldn't have laughed," he said, to no one and everyone. The driver's eyes held him a moment, then returned to the mirror. Noted, the silence wrote. The florist's delivery boy boarded with a paper cup, balanced like cargo. He set it on the ledge nearest the soldier. Lid turned to the side that wouldn't spill, and tapped twice, as if announcing arrival to an empty room. "If you want it," he said, already backward. The old soldier inclined his head. The currency he could spend. Across the street, the diner owner closed the ledger long enough to underline the morning's line with the careful gravity of someone who knows ink has weight. Bench photo witnessed he had written, and now beneath it, fair. The page that began with coffee now held arithmetic. The city couldn't invoice $1 that repaid a laugh. A seat surrendered to rewrite a minute. Inside the coach, the driver's hand hovered near the radio and did not press. Headway would tolerate the pause by the width of a breath. He checked the mirror, the soldier steady, the offered cup unclaimed but owned, the aisle gathered to its better posture. He eased the door shut and took the lane with the calm of someone who has learned that seconds can be exchanged like coin when the ledger of a place agrees. The camera blinked, counting faces, recording nothing it could weigh. Its file would show a bill and a nod, a cup traveling from a florist's hand to a ledge. It would not keep the pod where a boy decided to stand when sitting would have been easier, or the way a teen learned how to be young without being careless. Market slid behind. The coach breathed. Small accounts had been settled, no speeches, no receipts, only the town's arithmetic, paid forward and balanced in quiet ink. Back at the depot, the morning kept its squared edges. Fluorescence held steady. The rubber stamp did its small thunder across packet corners. Date, initials, the comfort of ink that behaves. Screens on the counter showed the city as moving dots, each with a time in red or green. Headway breathed like weather you could steer only so much. A coffee ring dried into a pale halo on the logbook's last page. The pen that preferred paper waited at the crease. He watched 17 slide from market toward the bridge, the dot easing from +2 to +130, then settling on time, as if the map had chosen to forgive. The mechanic's call had already come and gone, door checked. Hinge good, observed courtesy return. The words were neat in the maintenance notes, block letters that did not flinch. Beside them, a second line crest WWII. Photo had the tilt of someone writing with a hand that understood. both tools and memory. He rolled the clip from the municipal server once, not to judge but to understand. The red bead's vision laid the hour in rectangles. The bench, the yellow line, the hand offered, a paper shape that pixelated into gray, and still kept its meaning. Sound came thin through small speakers. Policy at half voice. Coins. Silence. He let the footage end and stared an extra second at the frozen door, as if the hinge might speak. The logbook waited. Margins are where decisions begin. He turned back to pages, where his own pencil had written earlier on photos. Tempand read the letters, like a reminder, you leave yourself on purpose, and pretend to find by chance. He sharpened the pencil with a blade, kept in the drawer for that job. The lead took its point without breaking. He underlined temp once. Light. And then he did what new rules require, when they are not ready to be orders. He copied the sentiment into places it could travel without shouting. On the wall near the time clock, a corkboard carried the week's detours, a cartoon about potholes, and a print of the old convoy, the buses under blackout canvas, the transit crest, young and blunt on their noses. He pinned a half sheet under the frame, blue ink in careful script so no one mistook it for a joke. Discretion, when ideas memory on a IT. He did not sign his name. He dated the corner. In the break room door he paused and looked at the photograph again. The men in it stared past him as they always did. Counted, rather than seen. The note would have to be enough for today. Back at the counter, he opened the binder that lived under the logged affair compliance section. Tabs rubbed shiny at exceptions. Policy ran clean in black. Exact fare. Valid pass. Operator may contact supervisor for guidance. There was a white space beneath that line. Empty for years. He wrote in blue, the color that says this is human, not printed. Route 17 Ono passes from memory. When memory identifies us, use judgment. Call if needed. He circled judgment once, thin so it wouldn't look like permission to improvise everything. The radio asked 3 coaches to space out through downtown. He answered and logged their confirmations without losing his place on the page. A driver from Route 22 stepped in for a packet, glanced at the binder because curiosity is part of the job, and read the blue line without reading it aloud. About time, he said to no one, a courtesy that spared names. The dispatcher nodded and slid the packet across the counter. The rubber stamp found its corner again. He typed a brief to the system that feeds the head sign messages. Not an alert, not a banner, only a note that would appear in the operator terminal at start of shift. Guidance update: veteran ID might include photos, unit coins, VA docs. Use discretion. His fingers hovered over send. He clicked. The message left the room the way true things should, quietly, but to many places. Outside the big doors, the yard exhaled as another bus returned to drink diesel and trade a set of minutes for a new one. The dot labeled 17 reached tower and held. The map stopped arguing with the clock. He capped the pen and closed the logbook to its ribbon. On the half sheet under the convoy print, the blue ink dried to the shade. Official forms tried to copy and never match. He stood a moment longer, with his palm flat on the binder, as if feel could carry guidance better than type. When the radio said, "Keep rolling," he said it back. The phrase meant what it always meant. Don't let the line unravel. But today it meant something else as well. Carry what was offered at the curb. Make room where rules forgot to. Write it down in ink, where the next shift will see it. The dots on the screen held their distance. The convoy in the frame did not move, but he had given it a small job anyway. Shift change never sounds like a bell. It sounds like zippers, Velcro, a cough near the time clock. The break room at the depot kept its own archive coffee rings on the laminate, a dent in the refrigerator door where a knee settled habitually. A framed convoy photo browned under glass. The mechanic came in with oil on his sleeves and a paperback-sized binder he had signed out of a back cabinet where old things wait to be needed. He set it by the clock like a book left in a church pew, quiet, not hidden. The binder was a scrapbook, built before smartphones convinced people their memories would sort themselves. Plastic sleeves held clippings, smaller photos mounted with corners, typed captions that wore the letterpress impression of the department's oldest machine. Someone had written on the title, "Page Depot Scrap, Transportation Relief, 1943, 1952, in a hand that leaned forward, as if walking. He wiped his fingers on a rag and opened it to the page that matched the frame on the wall. Blackout canvas over bus roofs. Chalked numerals. The transit crest younger and blunt. A second sleeve carried a print of the same line at noon. The canvas rolled back. Faces clearer. Sun indifferent. A caption read, "Convoy C, River Corridor." Winter temperatures in the margins, where someone could not resist measuring cold. A badge clinked as a driver leaned near. He had come in for a bathroom, and the minute of air a room like this offers, full of other people's breath and proof. His nameplate bore Carter in block letters that had been polished and then forgotten, as names on uniforms often are. He didn't speak. He looked. The mechanic lifted the sleeve's edge with the blunt care of someone used to gaskets. "Your guy," he said, a phrase that can cover a lot of ground. Carter leaned closer. In the noon photo, a list had been pinned to a bus nose with a pushpin. The paper's edge curled. The names were last names only, alphabet flattening difference in among them. The ink dark, where the pen must have pressed. Carter traced the letters without touching the plastic. The motion had no ceremony, only a direction. He had watched a name on the back of a smaller photograph at a curb. Here it lived, printed, official enough to be mounted. The mechanic flipped a sheet. Another page. A memo about the relief line's pay rate. A clipping about the city's buses doing their part. A small service photo of a man in a cap, not unlike the one that had climbed Carter's steps an hour earlier. On the corkboard above the scrapbook, the dispatcher's half-sheet had found its place. Discretion. When ideas memory honor it blue ink. Dated. No signature. Carter read it, then returned to the page that held the convoy. He did not say that the red bead on his bus could memorize everything and still miss this. He did not say policy had learned to step back a hair today. He lifted a corner slightly to catch light and then let it settle. Badges have their own language. The transit crest on the page, the one the old soldier had carried as a stencil through dust years ago, matched the crest welded above Carter's head, in lead every morning. His own brass rectangle gleamed without asking. In the lower right of the scrapbook, someone had taped a fabric strip a shoulder, a shred. At one edge, where the world had been rougher, the word transportation curved over it. Wrecked at one stitch and honest about it. A driver from Route 22 came in for a packet and stalled when he saw the binder open. He set his palm on the table beside it and did not sit. "That the frame?" he asked, not to be answered so much as to join. The mechanic nodded. The room held 3 men, and the time clock's green digits. No one reached for the coffee pot. Carter unpinned his badge and set it on the binder's lip. The way you lay a tool down briefly to look at a blueprint. It made a small, decisive sound against plastic. He studied it a moment longer, and thought of the old man's folded wallet. The quiet count of coins. The tape at a corner that matched a crease in his own understanding. He slid the badge back into its place. Brass met cloth and clicked.